Okay, I'd like to get the meeting started. I'd like to welcome everybody today. And if we'll stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have the roll call.
Kevin Lyman.
Here.
Michael Cox. Peter Hansel.
Here.
Jamie Gerardi.
Here.
Roberta Stias.
Here.
Chris Williams.
Here.
Chairman Charles Gray.
Here. Okay. So we're going to go over a few things today, but before we get started, anybody who plans to come up and speak or give testimony today, if you'll stand and raise your right hand, please, and be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
Okay, we have proof of publication.
The items were published in the Tampa Bay Times on June 22nd, 2018, November 30th, 2018, and December 21st, 2018, and by affidavit of certified mailing and site postings.
All right. And do we have some minutes to approve? Anyone? Denise, do we have minutes?
Taking a look to see if there's any minutes to approve. Does not appear that you have any minutes set for approval today.
Okay, then, in that case, we won't approve them. All right, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so we're going to get into the meat of the meeting, and before we do, we always ask for any public comment. If there's anything that someone is here to talk about today that is not currently on the agenda, this would be the time for you to get up and talk about it. You'd have 3 minutes to make your presentation. If I see no one raising their hand or getting up here, then we'll move on. And I don't. Okay. So let me just give you a little background information for those who haven't been here before. We're the Planning Commission. We're appointed by the County Commissioners. We meet twice a month. The Planning Commission serves as a local planning agency, and the Planning Commission holds public hearings and transmits to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations on comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezonings, and conditional use requests. The Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, and certain alternative standard requests. However, the final decisions that we make here may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. If anyone is in opposition to any comprehensive plan amendment, land development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission transmits a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it's important for you to attend the appropriate Board of County Commission meeting. Okay. So are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Planning and Development. Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. First item is PC1, PDD 18 CU 27. It's a conditional use, Patricia Weber Festmeyer, North American Towers LLC, Earthcom Services. This application, the applicant has requested a continuance to a date uncertain.
Okay. So we have a request. Is the applicant present? Is there anyone here to object? I see no one. We have a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Following item is PC2, PDD 197374, in the name of Tracy L. and Raul Rodriguez, Jr. Kiro Academy. This is for a private school in an agricultural residential district. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions from the Planning and Development Department.
Okay. It's on consent, right?
It is.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're going to go through items that are on consent, what we call the consent agenda. And if there are any items here that you hear us go through and you want to have talked about today, raise your hand, we'll take it off the consent agenda. Otherwise, they'll be approved at one time with one vote. Okay? All right, thank you, Denise.
Did you want to call for public comment, or if anyone is here in opposition to that one, or on
I'm just
PC2?
telling them that if
Okay.
they want something to raise your hand.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
PC3 is PDD 197375. It's a rezoning, Albert J. and Zerelda Capdevilla, and it's a change in zoning from an AC agricultural district to an AR agricultural residential district. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
Okay. See no one.
Item PC4 is PDD 197339. It's a zoning amendment, Cypress Creek Town Center, MPUD. Pasco 54 Limited, Pasco Ranch, and JG Cypress Creek. It's a rezoning from MPUD to an MPUD. Substantial modification to allow an increase in retail commercial square footage, a decrease in hotel rooms, and an increase in multifamily units on approximately 490 acres. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions.
Okay, and the applicant's here? Anyone here to object?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Pull that one.
pull that one, please.
Okay, so we're pulling PC4,
Okay.
right?
Item PC5 is PDD 19-7379. And it's a rezoning in the name of Daniel D. Pasquale and Kevin Singletary to change in zoning from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to a C2 General Commercial District. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
Okay, is the applicant present? Yes. Okay, and anyone here to object? Okay, I'll note here at this time that I will not be voting on this item for, because I have a conflict. Okay.
Item PC6 is PDD 19-CU16 in the name of Pasco Ranch Chipotle Mexican Grill. It's for the sale of alcoholic beverages, beer and wine on premises consumption in conjunction with the operation of a restaurant with outside seating and service of alcoholic beverages on a patio in a master plan unit development district. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions.
Oh, and is the applicant present? Yes. Anyone here to object? I don't see any objections.
Item PC7 is PDD 197381, and this is a special exception, Shady Hills Power Company, LLC. It's a special exception to amend previously approved special exception petition numbers 5528 and 7295. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions.
Applicant here? Yes. Anyone here to object? Okay.
PC8 is PDD 197376. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Michael and Adrian Zempella. It's a change in zoning from an AR agricultural residential to an I1 light industrial district. This light industrial park district, rather. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
The applicant's present? Anyone here to object?
Item PC9 is PDD 197377, zoning amendment in the name of May Storm and Michael Ristine to change in zoning from an R2 low-density residential district to an AR agricultural residential district. This comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
Is the applicant here? Yes. Anyone here to object? Okay.
Item PC10 is PDD 197378. It's a rezoning in the name of Ryan Morty. It's a change in zoning from AC agricultural district to an AR1 agricultural residential district. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
The applicant's present? Anyone here to object? See no one?
And Mr. Chair, I would like to read items P11 and P13 and ask for you to see if you have public comment so we can place those on the consent agenda, please.
Sure, absolutely.
Item P11 is PDD 197382 in the name of Evaristo Melendez. It's for a duplex in an AR agricultural residential district, and it comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Applicant present. Is there anyone here to object? Okay.
And item P13, PDD 197380. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Affordable Golf Carts, Inc. It's a rezoning from C2 General Commercial and AR Agricultural Residential Districts to a C2 General Commercial District, and it comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
Very good. Is the applicant here? Applicant here? Okay, anyone here to object? See no objections.
And that is the end of the consent agenda.
Okay, so remaining on the consent agenda is PC2, PC3, PC4 was pulled, PC5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve consent agenda as submitted?
Mr. Chair, you probably need to do a separate vote since you're abstaining on PC5. Is that the one?
Yes,
So
okay,
you probably need a motion on everything other than PC5.
all right, thank you.
All right, motion to approve items PC 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and we also need a motion on PC5.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Let the record reflect that the chair abstained on PC5.
Okay. All right, Denise.
Okay.
By the way,
Item
for any of
PC
you who were on consent agenda, you're welcome to stay, but your business is done unless you need to attend the county commission meeting. Thank you for coming. We hope you had a good time.
So item PC4 is Cypress Creek Town Center, PDD 197339. It's located on the northwest and southwest quadrants of State Road 56 and I-75. The applicant is requesting a substantial modification in order to include an increase in retail commercial square footage from 1,998,400 square feet to 2,399,500 square feet, which is an increase of 401,100 square feet. The request also includes a decrease in hotel rooms from 350 hotel rooms to 135 hotel rooms, and an increase in multifamily units from 230 to 600, which is an increase in 370 units. Here's a master plan which splits it into Cypress Creek Town Center North, which is predominantly where the hotels are and the multifamily is, and Cypress Creek Town Center South, which is where the retail, most of the retail component is. This area does have a retail component of it as well, but not a multifamily component or a hotel component. The subject site is developed and has received a number of site plan approvals. It's located in the South Market area, and there's a comprehensive plan amendment that's proposed concurrently with the MPUD modification. The applicant proposes to change the future land use from retail office residential to a planned development, and that is CPAL 18010. The applicant is proposing to rescind the associated development of regional impact for the project concurrently with the master plan unit development district modification and request and the comprehensive plan amendment. And Planning and Development Department recommends approval, actually it's to the Planning Commission, with the conditions as stated in your agenda packet. And I'm here for any questions, and the applicant is also here, right behind me.
Okay.
Well, since I brought this up, I'll just cut to the chase and ask a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you go ahead?
For the record, Clark Hobby, Hobby and Hobby, PA 109 North Brush Street, Tampa, Florida, have been sworn. Yes, sir, Mr. Hansel.
Thank you. Here are my concerns. You're going to reduce the hotels down to rooms, 135 approximately. My concern there is the county picks up a hotel tax. So that's going to be a reduction there. The other concern I had was the fact that the schools, you're going to increase the homes to close to 600, or increase it to 370 more units. That's going to be multifamily, therefore they're going to be children and students to the school district. I'm not sure what type of impact that would have on the school district itself. I can see that the school district is going to have to pick up transportation costs because none of those children, to the best of my knowledge, would be able to walk to school. So therefore, they'd have to be bused. So that's a concern I have, is that it's an additional burden on the district
Okay,
itself.
if I might get a little bit of a long-winded answer here, because I think it may help some of you all on the planning commission. So Cypress Creek Town Center was originally developed by two developers. There were entities that were controlled by the Sierra family, and on the south side, some of the land was controlled by the Jacobs Group and their affiliated entities. At this point, the Jacobs are totally out of the deal. Simon has developed its outlet mall, and the Sierras own and will continue to own for the foreseeable future the remaining developable land, as well as all of the property on the north parcel that's already been developed. So all those restaurants everybody sees there are, the land is owned and will continue to be owned and ground leased by the Sierras, okay? And in addition, when the original approval occurred here, the Sierras were the one who fronted the money that accounted for all of the off-site roadway construction on 54. And David probably knows the number off the top of his head, but it was something in the range of $50 or $60 million that the developer paid in cash to construct the roadway improvements on 54. Additional 2 lanes is my recollection, something like
I don't think it was quite that high.
it was a lot of money.
It was built when roads were a little cheaper.
Right,
So-
right. So all this is leading me to this point. So this is how we got to this point. The Sierras believe that they need some additional commercial. That's the primary thing we're doing here over the long haul. And as I said, they intend to continue owning all of these parcels and their family entities for many years. They wanted to extend the build-out date. There's no real easy way to do that. Actually, it's gotten a little bit easier now with the DRI changes a couple of months ago, but it's better for them over the long haul to get rid of the DRI. And so we picked a series of entitlements that you see here, okay, and studied them for transportation purposes and included adding about 400,000 in retail. However, and this is a big thing that you all need to understand, we included a land use equivalency matrix, and we do believe we have a decent chance of adding more hotel over time. So while we studied less and the initial approval is 135, there could be substantially more than that. The only real increase that you're going to see here is on the retail side and the potential for multifamily. Now on the multifamily, the Sierras have one parcel that is located towards the northern boundary of the north parcel that's already, I think, has some approvals for multifamily and fits within the 230 number of units that they already have. There's only one more parcel up near the north boundary that they are thinking about adding multifamily on, but they have no plans immediately. They're trying to plan for the next 15, 20, 25 years. And they do believe, because of the mixed-use nature of the project, with all the office and all the retail that's going to be built out there, that it's a good site ultimately for multifamily. So that's just wanted to give everybody a little bit of background. We're trying to make a true mixed-use parcel here on the north parcel. Now, as to the specifics, we did talk with the school board, and school board, you know, generally there's 2 analyses they always do. One is they look at your site, they look at the area, and they ask themselves, do we need another school on your site? And they told us they did not here, okay? And then the other thing that they have to do pursuant to the comp plan and pursuant to state laws, they have to look at, you know, whether we're meeting the concurrency requirements, and our concurrency zones essentially are countywide, and we don't have failures there. And Chris can weigh in here, but that's, so we are not proposing really to do anything revolutionary. with regard to schools. So, Chris, unless I'm missing something.
No, and I'll jump in here real briefly, and thank you, Mr. Hansel, for bringing that up. I'm glad that other folks besides myself are looking at that, so, so thank you. Yeah, and of course, we always get a little squirrely when housing units are increased, but in this case, our student generation rates for multifamily are not as high as single family, so I pulled up my spreadsheet, and so with 230 multifamily, we'd be getting 27 elementary, 12 middle, and 16 high school students projected with 600 units. I mean, yeah, an increase of 370 for 600 units. We'd have 69 elementary, 31 middle, and 41 high school.
What schools will they be going to?
That's what I'm getting to next. So in this area is particularly zoned for Denham Oaks Elementary currently. Denham Oaks Elementary currently is under capacity. So we feel like we have sufficient room to house these particular students here. We also did acquire recently another school site in the Northwood development, which if things continue to grow, we can always open that school, and we might do some rezonings and be able to spread that out. For middle and high school, these students would go to Cypress Creek Middle High School, and that's one facility. We just broke ground, and we'll be opening a brand new middle school right next to the high school, and that's going to open in 2020. And so we feel like we have sufficient capacity to house these students in the middle and high school as well, once we get that new school open. So we're comfortable with this particular increase.
One last, just one, and maybe this is overkill, but one last thing that did color our view of this whole thing, the DRI entitlement schedule, if you include both the existing phase 1 and phase 2, which needed to be studied for transportation purposes, had 630 units. So if we look at it simply with what was already in the DRI but needed additional transportation analysis, it's actually a net reduction.
And that's a good point, Mr. Hobby, because the other thing, just for y'all's interest, if they, originally when they come in with a DRI, we were looking at those particular entitlements. And when they do come in with changes, we do compare what the change is compared to what additionally we said would be okay with. So, yeah, that's a good point as well.
Yeah. No, I want to make it very clear that I'm not opposed to this in any way. I would be remiss if I didn't do some type of research on this and ask some sensible questions, at least in my opinion, sensible.
Totally agreed, and this is one project that was big enough, maybe I should have come and seen the planning commission members. I'm learning a lesson here today.
No, you're fine. The document here is relatively clear, but I have just two quick questions.
Yes, sir.
On one of the pages, it says the schools may include, don't use the word may, they just include private, charter, or traditional public schools.
Right.
Is the developer contemplating putting a private or a charter school in here, perhaps?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
And then the
Again,
other one I saw.
we're trying to build flexibility over a longer period of time.
Well, it'd be nice if they, in my opinion, put some type of charter
Sure,
or
sure.
private school in there.
Right.
The other question I have too, I noticed back in one of the pages that I read, it said that in, I believe, 2016 or something, they deleted the substation for this area. Now,
Right.
I personally would suggest or recommend that may want to be put back on the planning. That quadrant of the county, that area is very close to I-75, so if there was a substation there for the sheriff's department, and the growth of that area could provide additional police protection for not only the residents of the area and certainly for the businesses in that area, but also to provide some type of quick response to the interstate in there. I know between 52, at least in my opinion, 52, let's say, Bruce B. Downs or Fletcher, right in that Wesley Chapel area, there seems to be a significant number of auto accidents. Now, I know the county or the state will say, we're working on that issue. That's pretty much the party line.
Right.
It always will be. But I thought if there's some type of substation were to be considered, it might be prudent. So anyway, I just throw that out to you.
Good point, and two things I would say about that. The reason why that came out in 2016 is because a facility was given as part of a very small facility, like a booth, as part of the outlet mall, and the sheriff decided at that time they didn't want it, okay? But the second thing I would say is in my conversations with the sheriff very recently, I mean, within the last 2-3 weeks, their bigger issue relates to funding for jails and how they're gonna deal with that capacity, and we're trying to solve that now. And on some of the larger projects, we're discussing it with him, he's telling me he doesn't even want more substations. So, you know,
Okay, I
I'm just
understand.
taking his word for it.
You know,
I don't disagree with you that it would be a logical place, though.
I was gonna debate about the incarceration, but this is not the place for it. You know,
Right.
so.
Well, thank you, I appreciate your comments, happy to answer any other ones.
So just one last comment, because I think the increase in the school impact fee never came to the planning commission. I think it only went to the DRC. So Mr. Williams, you may want to remind the planning commission about the recent increase in the school impact fee and what it went up to, if you want to comment on that.
Sure. So, the last many years, our school impact fee for a single-family home was about $4,800 per single-family home. I don't remember what the multifamily is. I want to say around 2,000.
I think it's like 3,400. I
And
think
now
it
it's
almost
gone up.
tripled
Yes.
in this last cycle from about 1,000 to 3,000 is my recollection.
So now we're in the 7,000 plus range for single-family home, and yeah, probably in the 6,000 range for multifamily. And so what that does is that obviously we're getting the money after the impact. However, that money does go to build additional capacity, whether it be new schools or the purchase of school sites, or if we needed to add a wing somewhere, that money can only be used to increase capacity at schools that's attributed to new growth. And so the additional revenue we are getting from the raise in the impact fee certainly will help us in the long term. I don't know if that asks you or give you the history that you were looking for.
No, I'm just not sure if the planning commission knew that there was a recent increase in the school
Yes.
impact fee.
And
In
it
fact, it's
just
the
went
only
up
increase in
January.
impact fees that our board
Yes.
has approved probably in the last 10, 15 years.
Yes, and it was a phased-in approach, so last January it went up to a certain amount. This past January 1st, I think it went up to the next amount, and then next year it's supposed to go up another additional time.
My only remark, my wife says sometimes I ought to just stay quiet. I understand that the impact fees, from what I read, is used to construct facilities. What I'm trying to get to is the fact that in this particular area that they're going to develop these homes, the students will need to be bused, and that's an ongoing expense that's going to be borne by the district. That's all I'm trying to get across, is that it's going to be a continuing fee. Whether you have impact fees, will it cover the bus transportation? The answer is no, it's going to take care of construction.
Well,
Actually,
one
that's
one
not
thing,
true.
hold on, one thing you,
There's a portion of the impact fee that actually is for buses.
Not
Not for
But-
operation of the buses. but
potentially,
to buy the buses.
even more important, I know that there's been a lot of discussion from one commissioner about multifamily recently. But one thing that is important to remember, and David and I have talked about this recently, is, you know, with now we have 2 homestead exemptions essentially on single family. That's one of the benefit of multifamily units when they're apartments, is that, you know, the county is getting residual annual income off of the general revenue portion of the tax bill. And it's at a significantly proportionate higher rate because there's no homestead. So anyway, kind of for different discussion.
Yes, but I am happier than a hog and slop to see this come to the county. It was needed. I know many, many years ago, I used to go to some of the county meetings and advocate for I think it was the Jacobs Group that handled that
Right.
time. And so I'm very happy to see it there.
Well, we appreciate it, and I appreciate your comments.
Well, and to tack onto that, Mr. Hansel, it's nice to see multifamily in these kind of projects, because you want people to be able to walk to these amenities that are.
Well, that's Mr. Sierra's vision for it, and the reason he's got it up, it's basically in the 2nd or 3rd tier up off of the road, but still close enough to walk to all the, I guess they could run, to walk to all the restaurants that are down in the front edge.
That is, I would like to make a comment just based in that topic. I would love to see in Wesley Chapel or Pasco County walkable areas, We don't have that. We have some concepts in Watergrass Mall, but this specific location invite to this type of multi-use development, and I'm totally in favor of this. So basically, when you combine a multifamily, when you combine restaurants, hotels that invite to that, I just anxious to see not just this master plan that is really basic. I just want to see how they are going to connect all these use in the to favor the pedestrians.
Well, we've actually, I know the county doesn't have it on these slides. We've already built most of the infrastructure to do just that. There's a whole series of roads up there that
Yes.
interconnects everything. We're really lucky. I mean, this is a good client for me in the sense of Mr. Shear and his family have been at this a long time, and they really know what they're doing. And so their vision for this property, it's been for 30 years now, is to do exactly what we're doing, to maximize it, have a very strong mixed-use community, especially on that north parcel. So that's what we're trying to do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is
So
there
we-
anybody who's here to speak or have questions about it from the floor? Anybody to object? See no one? Anything, Denise? No? All right, we have a motion?
I'll motion that we approve PC4.
I second the motion.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Get you there. Trying to get you there. What are you, 12? There we go.
Good afternoon. Alexandra Laporte with Planning and Development. We are here for the review of the landscape plan for the special exception that was approved on November 15th with the condition of approval to bring back the landscape plan. And so here we are today to do that. The owner applicant has posted for the property, mailed notices and re-advertised for this hearing in accordance to section 304.2. And as I said, the special exception portion of this was already approved November 15th, and this is just coming forth your review of their revision to the site, the landscape plan, to address any further concerns and by yourself or the neighbors. The revision and the applicant will further go into detail, but primarily they increased the proposed landscape screen around the area to the west and on the second westernmost driveway. They, as you can read in the bullets, they changed various items and provided more layering effect of the landscape. Just to refresh everyone's memory, where the site is located is on Satin Leaf Lane and Smith Road. And the parcel in question was just part of the expansion of the already existing substation. And here's the landscape plan as it is right now. I will turn it over to our applicant to go into further detail on the landscape plan.
Can I say something just for the records?
Yes.
I received a request to meet Meredith Del Camp, a representative for Duke, and the landscaping engineer the week before the holidays. I accept the request. We met, we discussed the plan. I just want to keep that on the records, please.
Thank you. I also have email communications that I will enter into record as well between the applicant and the commissioners. So I'll bring that forward. Thank you for reminding
Thank
me.
you.
And I also do want to mention Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. I also do want to mention that Ms. Meredith also met with Chairman Gray yesterday, and Chairman Gray will be providing an ex parte form, as will be Commissioner Saez, providing an ex parte form for those meetings that occurred, those in-person meetings that occurred.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I met with her too, and I provided ex parte.
Yes.
so
Yes,
I just
we
wanna-
have that on
okay,
record
very
from
good, no
last
problem.
time.
I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll get your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Drew Gilmore with Duke Energy, 3300 Exchange Place, Lake Mary Boulevard in Lake Mary, Florida. I was sworn. And we brought hard copies of this presentation and then 11 by 17 landscape plans that are easier to view than the presentation. At the board's pleasure, we can, if you accept those, we can hand those out.
We have a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
And second. Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks. That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have mine from yesterday still.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have mine.
Okay, and Alexandra had already given a quick refresher of the site, and we're just essentially showing the same. This was the parcel on the west side that we purchased. This shows the proposed substation equipment expansion. It was this piece right here over the former parcel line, if you will, that required the special exception that you folks approved in November. The just to remind you, the neighborhood to the south is the Meadow Point community, Provence and Meadow Point, I believe. And to the west and the north is the Satin Leaf community. So when we talk about those two respectively, it's just orienting you folks on the geography. We're going to keep this really brief because, as you folks know, we've talked a lot about the landscape plan. So really, as a few of the commissioners had already mentioned, we've had several meetings and communication with quite a few folks. We've met with Chairman Gray twice. Each separate meetings we had with Commissioner Saez and Commissioner Girardi, as they had mentioned. We reached out to all the commissioners to offer to meet, and particularly we were seeking feedback of concerns with the landscape plan so we could be prepared today. In addition, we had an in-person meeting with several neighbors in the Meadow Point community. We've met with some neighbors in the Satin Leaf community, the closest neighbors to the substation. Had a follow-up conference call the other day with folks in the Meadow Point community. We have also reached out to the Meadow Point HOA and have begun discussions with those folks, and we'll talk about in a second here our plans there. And in addition to that, we've had several phone calls and emails with various interested parties. So we heard you, and that in the beginning of this process there was a feeling that we weren't being very communicative. The pendulum may have swung too far in the other direction, and we're hoping we're not harassing people at this point, but we really are trying to get as much input as we can. What we heard back consistently about the landscape plan was the area of concern to the extent there was any with the on-site landscaping was what we've been calling the Southern Gap area. And I believe at your last hearing it was pointed out we had some low growth. Now, as I had mentioned previously, and you may hear today as well from some other folks, there is some feeling too that we may have over-landscaped in some areas, and I'll let other folks speak to that. But what the changes that I'm about to talk to you about, the only enhancements we've made since the last time we were before, he was in the Southern Gap area. So just real quickly, you can see, again, in the Southern Gap area, here's the next section I'm about to talk about is right here. That section, if you follow along with the 11 by 17s, if you'd like, in that Southern Gap, is primarily this bottom area here, which is denoted on the landscape plan as Section E. Instead of the low-growth core grass, what you can see is we have quite a mix of vegetation in here now, and really took the approach to stagger and the layered approach. And so some taller vegetation, some understory vegetation, if you will. Primarily, we're looking at Eagleston hollies, Yopon hollies, and I'll show you, actually, why don't we do that on the next slide here, and we can always come back. In the blue box here, these are the primary vegetation types, other than the low-growing core grass, that we have added. We've extended the berm through that area as well. So on top of the 18-inch berm, we'll be planting this enhanced vegetation, depending on the species, at height of installation, plus or minus 10 feet. And so we will be looking to get what we can in terms of a mature growth commercially, and still able to transport it and give it a better chance of taking root. In here, what we try to show here is really what we're talking about. So this is a cross-section of the berm, again, 18 inches above grade at the center. And this is just a general representation, because different species stagger depending on where on the perimeter we're talking about. But this layered approach, what we're referring to, you can see we'll have understory vegetation, and so you don't have a canopy, but then have gaps, if you will, on the bottom. And so we're really trying to fill that in. This bottom section here, again, is that Section E. It's just blown up so you can see it a little bit better. One of the reasons you see at an installation that we're planting these about 15 feet apart. That's required because as these grow and fill out, if they're planted too closely together, the vegetation will basically touch each other and shield it from sun, and those will not do well, and the edges tend to die. So they're planted far enough apart to allow them time to grow, take root, and to fill in those areas. So what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about here, even though this is off-site and outside of the special exception permit, a lot of the concern, as you know, had come from various folks about trying to provide visual mitigation and shield, particularly the neighborhood to the south here. Again, this is the Meadow Point community. So Duke Energy is committed to planting off-site vegetation, if you will, and understanding, again, we know that that's outside of the special exception permit, but we have talked quite a bit with the neighbors about that. We're looking at these three, I knew I'd do that. We're looking at these three areas here primarily because they would provide the highest level of screening and buffering, if you will, to the closest neighbors who are in this community to the south. In addition, looking at planting mature growth trees down here because this is the main entrance, the primary entrance in and out of the neighborhood as well. These trees that we're looking at here are substantial. We're have some preliminary draft landscape plan actually that we just saw came in on our drive down here. We're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of plus or minus 80 trees, actually, so a substantial planting, layered, so it's not a straight row, layered and staggered and designed in such a way to provide the maximum visual screening for the folks in this neighborhood who are closest to the property. As I mentioned, we are committed to doing that, so regardless of whether it was a requirement or not, we're going to move forward we have begun discussions with the representative from the HOA, because the areas where we're talking about, again, primarily these areas here are owned by the HOA. They're not on privately owned individual parcels, and so that's why we'll be working directly with the HOA on those. So as I mentioned, I tried to keep it very brief for you and just touch the highlights of what's changed since the last time. I will answer, of course, any questions that I can. If you have specific questions about species and growth rates, I brought somebody much smarter than I that can answer those for you.
All right, are there any questions from there?
Just a comment, and I'm really happy to see that you finally have some type of agreement with the neighbors and the HOA. I received an email today from one of the neighbors explaining that Duke offered them, and I just expressed what I read, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the commissioners read it too, that you offered them to cover some expenses that then you denied to cover. I don't know exactly what is going on, but if somebody can explain that to me, or a neighbor is here to explain what I just mentioned, I don't know.
So
expenses that are related with the legal fees that they have been paying to attorneys or litigations that they occur during this process.
Okay, so if I understand the question, it's about the attorney's fees?
Yes, it was around $17,000 or something like that.
We did receive a request, and I guess at the pleasure of the board, if you want me to go ahead and answer those questions. I'm not sure if it's inside or outside of the...
Well, let me just say this, just for everybody's benefit. The fact that whether you agree to pay attorney's fees or not, that's really not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the landscape element. And I know that there was some disagreement as to whether you would contribute to the attorney's fees or not. Whether you ultimately do or not has nothing to do with this meeting. We're only here to talk about the appropriateness of the landscaping.
Sure.
So I think that's correct, isn't it?
I would agree with that. I mean, we don't really have the ability to impose a condition that they pay the attorney's fees. So, and really the only thing on your agenda is the landscape plan adequate or not? I don't mind if he wants to answer the question, if you just want it for informational purposes, but ultimately you're here to decide whether the landscaping is adequate.
Okay.
So I can quickly answer the question that no, as a company policy, Duke Energy does not pay attorney's fees for groups that oppose our projects. We don't have any control over that. If be more than happy to talk about that afterward if you'd like more background or more depth about that. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that, Drew.
Sure thing.
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Is somebody here to speak in opposition or have questions that we have not addressed so far? If there are, they need to be directed specifically to the landscape and nothing else.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Nancy Lillibridge. I live at 30977 Satin Leaf Lane, Wesley Chapel. I was sworn in. I live on the northwest corner of the property, so I'm part of the Satin Leaf group. So you can see my house there. I don't know how to use the pointer, but anyway. So there, that's my house. So that's my view of the substation. And I'm fine with the substation. I guess the point I would like to make is that on the north side of the property and the west side, we would not like to have all of that landscaping installed. In addition, we would not like to have a 6-foot PVC vinyl fence. We would prefer that it remain barbed wire or some type of something that is, close to what we all have out there. We live out there because we don't want to live in a subdivision, and we don't want it to be made to look like we live in a subdivision. And furthermore, we have found that we also have a Withlacoochee River substation to the north of their original substation. And what happens is after the landscaping is installed, it's typically not maintained over time. And then it ends up looking just like a big mess out there. And with the PVC vinyl fence, what we found, there's a subdivision to the north that has that. The first tropical storm that comes along, pieces of it break off and fly around all of our properties out there. And then again, it's not maintained. So what we would like to ask for is that the landscape buffer to the north and the west be removed, and that the PVC vinyl fence be removed, and that they just put in something that is, you know, what you would see typically in a rural setting, such as barbed wire fence or something like that. So
Could you point
that's
your house out one more time on that
sure,
map?
he can.
And my second part of that question is, are you part of Meadow Point?
No, I'm part of the Satin Leaf Owners Group. I enter, that's my house to the north. The
Okay.
Meadow
So
Point group is to the
basically,
south.
how much land do you have there?
I have 1 acre, and then the remaining 9 acres where my house is, my parents own.
Okay, thank you.
So can I ask
So-
a clarification question? So I understand why you're asking it to be removed to the north, but it looks like there's another property owner to the west that could be adversely affected by your request to remove. So I'm a little fearful about removing it to the west when we don't know who that's going to affect.
Okay, well, if we have somebody to speak, we'll call you up in just a minute.
Yeah, so I enter my property, I come around down that road, around, that is how I have to enter to get to my property. And I have been in communication with the other homeowners, and she may come up and speak about it, but none of us want to see the white vinyl fence and the landscaping that's proposed on the west side or the north.
So can I ask the applicant a question?
Sure.
Because I just need to, I want to make sure I don't have a due process issue. So for the landscaping that's on the west and the north, have you represented to any of those people that live to the west or north that that landscaping would exist?
Oh, definitely, and I think that's why they're here. And we touched a little bit on this, and I think in a previous hearing, where there may be some competing interests, and so certainly the neighborhood to the south was interested in as much visual buffer and mitigation. And these two neighborhoods are distinctly separated, if you will, by buffer and vegetation barriers already. So if you're coming into the Satin Leaf community up here, there's no sense or feeling that you're in this community at all. They're very distinct, different access points. The maps are a little deceiving because it shows the Old County Smith Road. This is not passable. This is not actually a passable road at all. And they're completely separated and with a buffer between these two. And so we didn't want, and we have mentioned this to some of you in our meetings, that we know that the Satin Leaf folks up here are interested in less or no vegetation on the north and west. The Meadow Point folks are interested in as much on the south, which makes sense. And certainly I think the plantings in their neighborhood is going to help with that a lot. We didn't want to come in as Duke, the applicant, asking the commission if we can now do less than what you folks have been asking us to do.
My specific question is, did you meet with anybody to the west or north
Yes.
who said they do want that landscaping?
No, we've not heard from anybody on the north or the west that is asking us for the landscaping. And I do believe that the two neighbors who have the closest view of this entire property, one you just heard from Mrs. Lillibridge, and her husband Tyler is here as well, live in this property. And then the property owner who lives here is here as well, and may wish to speak if you would like to hear. These two neighbors have the closest and the best view, if you will, of our entire property.
Okay, you answered
Okay.
my question.
Thank you.
So is there any reason why we can't make a change there if both
Well,
parties are-
I was a little concerned that somebody was promised that landscaping and then they would have had no notice until now that it's going away. But what I'm hearing from the applicant is they haven't promised anybody to the west or north that landscaping, so if that's the case, then I don't really have a legal concern. It's really up to the planning commission.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, I'm thinking in order to accommodate everybody's needs, I think that's a reasonable request, if we can include that in a motion when we have a motion. Okay. Anybody else need to speak? You're gonna tell us that it's okay with you, or take it away, right?
I haven't been sworn. My name's Ethan Little.
Oh, no, you can't talk. You haven't been sworn. No.
Yeah, 30977 Satin Lake Lane.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the president of the Landowners Association, only because of all the growth in Wesley Chapel that we even require a Landowners Association. You know, we have a buffer to the north, we have a buffer to the south, and nobody maintains the buffers, including the people to the south who want more buffer on our side. I mean, if they want to add more trees on their property, I'm fine with that. I'm opposed to the buffer on the south as well as the west and the north. They're just simply not maintained by Duke Energy, Withlacoochee, Meadow Point, Ashley Pines. Nobody maintains any of them. I maintain the majority of them, personally. So we just ask that it doesn't go in. And we've spoke to Duke many times, and they've been afraid to ask you not to put it there because they think that you think it needs to go in so they can get permitted to go in. They're gonna go in regardless because we need power in Pasco County. So we're just simply asking not to have to look at that. And, you know, we'd also like to ask, and may or may not be on this forum, but that everything outside of what they're required, because they have so much more land to the north that is never used before, that we'd like to work a deal out with them where they, you know, make a deal with us on the remainder of the land or give it to the county as a park or something so it can't be turned into future substation. That's all.
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, we can't control that aspect.
I understand.
We just need to talk about landscaping.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I'm a little confused. You indicated that, the way I took it, you're not really that concerned about what's planted in the ground. I took it as, your biggest concern is, once it's planted, nobody takes care of it. Is that true?
No, I prefer to not have it planted in the ground. I prefer to leave it just the way it's been looking all its life in Pasco County and not go out there and plant a bunch of trees that aren't native to the area. So I have to look at it. I'd rather have the open pasture view that I've had forever.
But I marked down a couple of times when you indicated that your concern, and I think you used the word concern, or nobody's taking care of it, nobody's taking care of it, nobody goes out
Nobody
and
takes care of any of the buffers you put in around all our property out there.
That's what I was getting to. Because we've heard from the residents of Meadow Point, they want more,
Okay,
and I take it you want less.
I want less.
Okay,
He wants to
They
list
already
those.
have a buffer. They put it in,
yeah, okay.
or their developer
But I
did.
just want to make it clear in my mind.
And there's a row of oak trees
Okay.
sitting right there now that they don't
He
see
wants
the
none.
substation.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
want not, or if it's planted, you want it taken care of. You want
I'm an
s-
original Pasco County resident, a lifelong Pasco County resident, not a transplant.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
Right.
But I just want to clear my mind that if it was planted, that you want somebody to take care of it. If it, let's say there's no negotiating on what's planted in the ground.
I
you wa-
prefer it not to be
I
planted.
understand that, and that's clear. Now, let's say it is planted.
Yeah, then
but
go
you
back
want
and make
somebody
them
to
all take care of it.
You want somebody to take care of it.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are you bringing something new to the discussion?
No, just that I live in the house with like the big circular driveway. Oh, my name's
Which one,
Victoria
I'm sorry,
Boyman.
which one?
I live at 3949 Satin Lake Lane. I have been sworn in. We'd like to look at the pasture. We don't want to see a fence. We'd like the fence tucked in as tight as it can against the substation and just look at the green pasture like we look at now. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So can I ask the applicant another question? Sorry.
Okay.
The applicant.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you the same, I asked you about the west and the north.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you, since now we have a request to remove it on the south, have you represented any of the property owners to the south that you were gonna put that landscaping in?
Oh, most definitely. Gosh, I keep hitting the wrong button here. The buffer to the south, in addition to, just for everybody's reference, the plantings in the neighborhood to the south was more of a recent development in our ongoing discussions with those folks. But leading up to that, leaving as much as the existing landscaping that already exists today and as much as we can do to mitigate the view has always been the context of our conversation with these folks to the south.
Okay, so I don't have a legal concern if the planning commission wants to remove the landscaping to the west or north. I do have some legal concerns with removing it to the south, because if the applicant represented to those landowners that they would have landscaping on the south, and they had no way of knowing that it was gonna be removed at the public hearing, if you're intending to move it to the south, we'd have to continue this and renotice it and make sure that all those landowners to the south knew that there was a proposal to remove the southern landscaping.
One other thought, and I would just offer this up for your consideration, and you folks are the experts on the process, but after this step, our understanding is we enter site plan review, and in terms of the specific details of what stays and what leaves, I don't know if there's a mechanism to continue this in site plan with the staff to make sure all the interests are balanced, and that's another option as well.
Well, I think we could make a motion to leave some and remove some, couldn't we?
Yeah, just the only thing I would ask is that you not remove,
The south.
not make a motion to remove the south, because I don't think that the notice is proper to do that. I don't think that the residents,
Okay.
there may be residents who didn't appear today because of the representation that they have landscaping to the south, and
Totally.
for you to remove it, I think is gonna create a concern, so. But if there's if there's never been a representation that to the landowners to the west and north that they would have landscaping, I'm less concerned about that.
And just to keep in mind that because this kind of is an anomaly and circumvented the standard, the site plan, once it's submitted to be reviewed, the landscape plan will have to be consistent with that site plan. So we don't have a site plan that's been submitted yet. So this kind of came before you before that process. So there will be a little bit of, negotiation based on the final site plan anyhow.
Okay.
That being said, their landscape plan that they submit a site plan is gonna have to be generally consistent with your approval, so.
Right.
I think you need to give
Be specific.
the applicant and staff some guidance about wherever there will or will not be landscaping.
Do I have a motion?
If we make a motion that we can approve this, and I'm willing to make that motion, that landscaping is required to the south and to the north, and that the west, is it the west?
The north and west.
The north and west
They don't
are
want.
left open for discussion with staff. Is that doable?
Well, there may be a certain amount, a minimum amount of landscaping they have to do to the west and north just to meet code. And that I don't know if staff wants to comment on that. Is there some minimum amount they have to do to the west and north to meet code?
Yes, hi, Brad Tippin, Planning and Development. It would be better if the desire is to not have landscaping there, to actually express that here as a directive for us.
Right.
Otherwise, there is landscaping that would be required there by code, and we would need to go through an alternative standard process.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
So is your motion to exclude the north and the west?
Yes.
Okay.
But to otherwise approve their landscape plan?
Yes. The south would stay.
Exclude the fence and the landscape on the
Exclude
north and the west.
That would be my,
Well, they're gonna have to have some kind of fence.
They already have a fence. They don't have to have a fence at the border and a 40-foot setback of their property.
That's up to them and you to decide. But we're not gonna require the landscaping.
But the landscape plan calls for a 4-foot or 6-foot opaque fence, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
Can we
that
get
would
that?
not be
Is
part
the
of
motion
this.
I think his
exclude that?
motion is to remove both the fence and the
Okay.
landscaping
Perfect.
That is correct.
Yes,
Great. I'll second that.
on the north and west only.
That is correct.
right.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion, and we have a second and a third. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
So I think we're done with this, right?
Let's come back.
I don't know, man, we're gonna change it next time.
One more time.
Good gosh.
Good job, Gavin. Okay. Nobody's gone away angry, so I guess we did okay. I never did get this thing to work.
One more, huh?
Yeah, we got a code or something.
P14.
P14. Add them on.
Can't go yet, man.
Can't
Try-
go yet.
Did you make a motion out already?
He's way too eager.
He's going for a hamburger or something.
So are we ready for the final one?
Yep.
Could you ask him to keep it down to a mild roar? Okay. You're on.
Good afternoon. Mary Duke with the Long Range Planning Division, Planning and Development Department. I'm presenting today. At this point, the Planning Commission is going to sit as the local planning agency. This is PDD 190277, a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment for CPAS 1901 Dixie Belle Paint Company. This project is located to the north of Ridge Road and east of Galen Wilson Road in the West Market area. It's a proposed small-scale comprehensive plan amendment from Res 12, residential 24 dwelling units per gross acres, to COM commercial. This is on 3.6 acres, and the subject property was zoned C2 in 1988, and the parcel reflects a conflict zoning. The subject property currently is a vacant retail warehouse, and the applicant is proposing to utilize the property for paint, retail sales, and bottling of latex and chalk paint. The Pasco Economic Development Council has requested an expedited review. This map shows the existing future land use in the inset in the bottom left corner as Res 24 flu. This map depicts the proposed future land use in the inset at the bottom left corner. The green area is COM commercial, which is proposed. The surrounding future land uses, existing uses, zoning districts are to the north. There's a multifamily high-density zoning district with a future land use of public, semi-public, and the existing uses are Pasco County's facilities management and the Galen Wilson complex. To the south is an industrial light district across the road, and Ridge Road itself is agricultural. The future land use is Res 24, residential 24 dwelling units. And the existing use is the Ridge Road right-of-way, and the High Ridge Industrial Park is across the road on the south side of Ridge Road. To the east, there is an agricultural district for zoning, an IL future land use district, and the Duke Energy substation. To the west is a multifamily high-density district with a future land use classification of Res 24 and high-density residential in the Radcliffe condominiums. So here's an aerial that shows that. So to the north is the Galen Wilson complex. To the east is the Radcliffe condominiums. This is Pasco Elementary and Pasco Middle. This area is where there's a 32-lot light industrial park called High Ridge that's in the process of being developed. In terms of consistency with the comprehensive plan, the commercial flu helps to identify areas exhibiting a broad range of commercial uses and recognizing the continued existence of these areas through long-range planning timeframe. The proposed use of the subject parcel is consistent with the flu classification. Additionally, the subject property is located within the Embassy District of the West Market area, and this is consistent with the encouragement of appropriate development within the West Market area, as well as Policy Flu 1.8.7 for economic development. As I stated earlier, this is a project that is being encouraged to be expedited by the Pasco Economic Development Council. A transportation needs assessment was conducted by county staff for this site, and it identified that the project will have volume to capacity ratios of 0.096 on Ridge Road and 1.07 on Little Road. Staff determined a negative impact to the level of service on Little Road, which is the segment south of Ridge Road, and Ridge Road, the segment west of Little Road, by the proposed amendment trips. The estimated daily volume of traffic is expected to increase by 190 p.m. peak hour trips on Ridge Road and 15 p.m. peak hour trips on Little Road, from Ridge Road to San Miguel Drive, and 57 p.m. peak hour trips from Ridge Road to Citizens Drive. Staff recommends approval of the proposed comprehensive plan amendment to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay. Is there anybody else to speak? Anybody to object?
This was a staff-initiated
Okay.
comp plan amendment because it was a conflict zoning.
Okay. Just want to make sure there's nobody here to speak against it. Okay. Is there any questions from up here? Are there any questions, I should say? If not, I'll have a motion. You guys must like it here.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion.
I'll
We have a
second.
We have a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, Chris.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.